Okay, so there's this thing that's born in each one of us, and as men, as little boys, and it's this desire, this deep desire to kind of, to come through. As Eldridge would say, we want to have what it takes, right? But I want to use the word hero, that we have it within us and the desire within us to be a hero, to want to be the hero. I've got three boys, 3, 5, and 9, and just to watch them and enjoy watching them play their games with their action figures or playing with their friends outside. They're always playing some kind of heroic type game, right? And they'll always make me the bad guy, by the way. If we're playing some kind of, hero game, I can't be a good guy. It's not, not in their vocabulary. So, Dad, you got to pick which supervillain you want to be. And I always pick a villain, and they always pick a bad guy. And usually how it goes is I win for a little while, and then I'm going to let them win, right? I'm going to let them come through. I'm going to let them be the hero. And I remember that as a kid. I always wanted to be that hero. I wanted to come through. I wanted to know that I have what it takes. And so we would play those games growing up, and we'd test ourselves against other guys, right? Sometimes it was in a wrestling match, right? Or maybe it was creating a ramp and seeing how far you could get on your bike and jump, you would do all kinds of stuff like that. I remember we used to have this ditch across the street from where we grew up. Remember that big old ditch? And we would create ramps across that ditch, or we'd run through that ditch, and we would jump our bikes. I remember one time we were going to do that, and I had a semi-new bike. I think it maybe a year old, and I jumped this ramp, and in your mind, you see what you're going to do, and that's not what happened by any means. It's like the Duke boys in the Dukes of Hazzard. They jump and yeehaw, and they land, and all they do is this, right, Derek? And they're there. Well, that's not what happened. I jumped, and it was like this, and the moment was wonderful. I was seeing all these lights flashing and all these people loving what I was doing, but very quickly I did this, and I went straight down. And the front of my bike hit, the forks broke and bent on my weight, and I tumbled over and get up, and suddenly, depending on who you're with, you're either good try or that was bad. But thankfully I was with some people that were encouraging, and we got another bike and we tried it again, right? And so, I remember that. I mean, there's so many stories of childhood things like that. We loved to, get on sleds when we had some snow where we could actually sled, and we'd make snow ramps. And we didn't always make the best choices on where we made our ramps. And we had this lady that owned all this land close to where we grew up, and we called her Miss Cabinets. What was her name? Was that her last name?
Yes.
And we would, it's my brother, by the way, but Derek here, but we would go and we'd create these ramps. And I remember me and the neighborhood boys creating this ramp, and we got on the sled, and we hit that ramp, and, there was a tree. It was not probably 10 foot from the ramp. Now, why did we do this, Because, wisdom is not there, right? You're 9, 10, 12 years old. You're not thinking about wisdom. You're thinking about adventure. You're thinking about being the hero. And so, that was so great. I was the hero when I was a kid. I felt like my parents were very supportive of that and being cheerleaders, so to speak, and making you feel good about who you were, and that was wonderful. Well, as I moved along, the enemy, of course, he brings these things in our life to where he wants to knock you down. He wants to make sure that you know that you're not going to come through. That, as a matter of fact, not only you're not going to come through, but he's going to say it with prejudice. You're not going to come through, and then he'll add a fill in the blank. Not only are you not going to come through, but you're also a fill in the blank, a piece of crap, whatever that word is that you have in your life, that somebody, usually your dad, has spoken over you and said, well, son, you're nothing but a whatever. And so I had some of those things, not as much from our dad, a little, some from mom as well, maybe a little from mom, but a lot of it was just stuff that I called myself, and I was hard on myself, and I would say these words of death, over myself. And suddenly I went from this idea as a young boy of being a hero to being more of the zero, right? And, got interested in girls, had pornography handed to me, and then I started this long addiction to that over the years of just really bad stuff in relationship to sexual addiction. And it wasn't just a, hey, that's a naked lady and she's pretty and, masturbation maybe once or twice. It was a lot worse than that, right? And so I had that for years and years as part of my story. But, I still always had this desire, right, to be the hero. I always wanted to come through. I always wanted to do the right things. But as I got to be a teenager and as I started to move through adolescence and all that, I didn't feel that way. I didn't feel very much like a hero at all. I felt like I couldn't come through and that things were just too difficult, that it was too hard to come through. And I still had this great support group. I mean, Mom and Dad and Derek. Derek's a lot older than me, by the way. And so he was always, the best big brother anybody could ever wish to have is what he is. And he was always supportive as well as everybody else. But it's about what you feel inside. And, you have these sentences, these things that you say over yourself and you curse over yourself, like, man, I'm just never going to be able to do that. I'm never going to be able to get past this sexual addiction, or I'm never going to be thin and in shape, I'm never going to whatever, right? And I've had those in my life. They plagued me, guys, my whole life, right? So even now, even at the place I am in my life now, I still have some of those sentences that I still have to deal with. I still have to say, that's not the truth. That's not truly, who I am. And so thankfully, I'm starting, to get over that. But a lot of where I started to get over that and start to get health, so to speak, is through New Wilderness Adventures. All right? So kind of to go back in that story some, I got some notes here, is, no, shut up, Siri. So to go back in that story, and it's important to know that I worked at two different churches, one here in North Carolina, and then I was at a church in Georgia for a while. Both stints at these churches were about 16 to 18 months. And the first church, it didn't go very well. That's where I met Mark. Actually, I was at Westview Baptist Church, 3 doors down from where Mark lives. He handed me Wild at Heart in the year it came out, not long after it came out. And never read the book. I told Mark I did. I went to, if you guys have read Wild at Heart, good. If you haven't, make sure you do. But the poser section is where basically you send out this messenger, this person that you want people to look at you and thinks that person does have what it takes, although that person is complete facade, it's not who you truly are, but you send that guy out to meet people new, like these guys that we're just meeting for the first time. It's very easy to send that messenger out to that person and shake that hand saying, hey, I'm Greg and I'm this is who I am, this is my job, I make this much money, and I've done all these cool things, and not really know that maybe I'm dying inside, but I don't want anybody to know that, right? So that's the poser. And that's who we usually meet when we meet a person for the first time, unless they've had significant healing in their life. And thankfully, I've had a lot of that healing, and I think I'm not quite as full of shit as I used to be. So I'm getting better, as Barry Strickland would say. But so I met Mark. He hands me Wild at Heart. Don't read it. I go to Georgia, all right, and the pastor there catches me in a lie. It's a wonderful thing, all right, an absolutely wonderful, horrible, by the way, but wonderful at the same time. And he calls me into his office. Thankfully, he handled my heart so tremendously well, because he could have very easily went to the powers that be, and I would have been done, right? And rightfully so. But he brings me in. He talks to me about why I'm doing this. Why am I lying? And I don't know. I'm depressed, honestly. I'm still addicted, which he doesn't know about. And my marriage is not doing well, and I'm struggling hard. I'm just really having a hard time. And he brings me in lovingly. Yes, this has got to stop. You can't do this anymore. But let me help you. Let me help you. And he did. And he loved on me. He met with me. He encouraged me. Not long after that, a guy named Eric Peters came to our church to do a concert. Jamie was there. He played too. He did a good job, by the way. And other people. He came into my office and he sees Wild at Heart on the shelf. Now this is 2003, early 2003, and he pulls it off the shelf. All right. And he opens it up, right? You know what a new book feels like that's never been opened, right? And so he opens it up and he says, have you ever read this book? And I'm like, yeah, it's a great book. I love that book. He's like, oh, really? And so he's like got it over his knee. He's trying to open it up, you know. And he's like, oh, okay, well, you know. And I at least had read the chapter headings, right? And so he looks in the book and he's like, well, what do you think about the wound? And I'm like, oh, you know, everybody's wounded. And he's like, oh, really? He said, well, you know, my book is, you know, it's full of notes and it's highlighted up. And he said, I read the wound section, man, and I blubbered. I teared up and snot and blood and tears all over my book, you know. And then he kind of just closed it back and put it on the shelf, and I'm like, busted, right? Thankfully, he didn't call me out. But the very next day, I get on the phone, I call Mark, and I was like, why do I need to read this blankety blank book? You know? He's like, I think, Mark, you said, you hadn't read it yet? And I was like, no. He's like, you need to read it, and then I want you to meet a guy named Randy Cooper. And I'm not going to tell this whole story. I love this story because it's central to my story, but I want to tell you this because what happened there is a burning bush moment, right? This moment where in the spiritual realm and in my heart something clicked that said, you know what? I've got to be that better man. You know, no more of this lying. I don't know how I'm going to ever get past sexual addiction. I don't think that's possible, but you know, I got to do something. Something has got to change. Because I'm miserable, Chrissy's miserable, we got to change something. And I started meeting with this guy, Randy Cooper, started reading the book, started going through the field manual. Wasn't long until we get to a boot camp. So I talked to Mark, had New Wilderness lead a boot camp for the church I was serving. There was 50 guys there or so, and we were in Bryson City, North Carolina. Guys, let me tell you, that was such an amazing thing. Again, Derek was there with me on that boot camp, and one of the things at boot camp that we do is we ask questions, and then we send guys out to get time alone with God. And man, it was so rich. You know, how often do you take time to go and just spend time with God? I mean, you know, I'm in ministry. I've been in ministry for a long time now, and I still don't get enough time with God. All right, I don't. I don't make it as a priority in my life like I should. You know, I don't want to sell myself completely short because I do spend time with God, but not like I want, right? And I know that God wants more. You know, I know He wants me more. And so I try to spend more time with Him, but I don't always. And at this particular boot camp, and if you've never been to a boot camp or some kind of men's retreat where you get to go spend time alone with the Lord, make it a priority in your life, okay? Come to a New Wilderness event that they have coming up. But anyway, so I'm at this boot camp, and one of the questions we ask is ask God what He thinks of you. Now, you got to think what I thought about myself, right? I didn't have a very good image of myself. I was overweight, had been overweight my whole life, pretty much. I was sexually addicted. My marriage was not doing well, and I'm youth and education pastor of a church that I'm going there, and I'm just surviving. If at best, surviving. Right? And so I get up in this tree house, and I'm sitting there, and, you know, the question is, go ask God what He thinks about you. And I didn't grow up, I mean, not that our dad, I'm sure our dad heard from God, but it wasn't in our vocabulary. It wasn't like it was something that He said, hey, guys, go practice on how to hear from God, or here's how I hear from God. I mean, we prayed, and we read the Bible, and we did all the good things Baptists should do growing up. But we never really kind of did that really close interpersonal, relational things with God. And so my idea of the way you heard from God is you went to church, okay? Or you read your Bible, or you heard from God maybe when you sung a song. And so the idea of going and sitting down and being still and being quiet and listening for God was just foreign to me, okay? It wasn't something that I thought that we did. And so I get up in this tree house, and there's guys scattered all around the campus of this little camp. And they're all praying and doing their thing. And my idea is, well, I was going to probably take my Bible, open it up, kind of point to a scripture somewhere, and that was going to be what God was saying. And Mark's encouragement and the other guys there were to stick with it, to listen and to write down whatever you hear. So I'm there in this treehouse, and God begins to speak. And he says something very plain and something he said to his own son, which is, you're my beloved son in whom I'm well pleased. And I did not think that about myself, guys. I mean, how can you be pleased with me, God? You know, look at what I've done. Look at the person I am. How can you be pleased with me? And he said, write it down. So I wrote it down, guys. And this journal is sacred to me. It's a sacred journal because I literally wrote page after page. He said, keep writing it until you believe it. And I wrote, 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 yep. And I wrote, and I wrote. And I kept writing. And I understood what Eric Peters was saying about the tears and all the stuff, because I was blubbering, I was heaving, in this. I mean, it was a burning bush, amazing moment in my life. And so go on. There's two more things that happened at that boot camp that are super important to me. And so I was, not long after that, I was with Mark, and we were having, I think Barry might have been there, Mark, I forget, but I know you were there. And I was telling Mark about what I was going through, and he and I had started talking pretty regular on the phone by this point already. And I was telling him what I was going through, and that what God was saying, and that I was very discontented working for the church. And, I was saying all these things about what was needing to happen in my future. And one of the things that happened that I needed in my life, because my dad had passed away in '99, so I needed a man with some weight, like Mark, some spiritual weight and some fatherly weight to tell me that I had what it took to follow God. All right? And so Mark basically, said, as I was telling this story, I think it seems very clear to me that you know what to do. And so I was kind of going through this, floundering time about whether or not I should leave the church. And so it was so important for me in my life at that moment to get that permission. Ultimately, it was permission from Father, right? But through Mark, to get that permission from Father God, through him, to move. All right? And so that's what I did. My pastor, that I was the one that caught me lying, he was there. I told him that, hey, I need to resign. I need to move on, and he applauded that, not because he didn't like me and he wanted me to leave, but because he said, you know what, Greg, I have been in this position at this church now. I'm in it for the career, not for the ministry. He said, I wished I had the ability to leave, but I can't. And so I left, came back to North Carolina. Now, the last thing that happened at that boot camp, which is one of the most important moments of my life, if not the most important thing that's happened to me spiritually, is I had another burning bush moment. It was a big boot camp, by the way, guys, for me. Huge. And so at the very end of this story, and this will go with the ending of the story I'm telling now, is that God, to set it up, Mark and Barry and some other guys were in this room, and they were praying over this man, and I felt like that I was the person that made this boot camp happen, right? And so I was supposed to be in there praying. I had a prideful moment, and I'm like, well, what the crap? Why are they in there praying, and they didn't invite me to come in there and pray too? My praying prowess is pretty amazing, by the way. And, I ought to be in there praying. And so, and I know some of you guys have heard this story before, so I appreciate you sticking with me on this. But, and so I went to go in, and Randy Cooper, the guy I mentioned earlier, he's the guy, actually I knew him the best at the time. He comes out, and he's like, no, you can't come in. So, what does the enemy, of course, want to do? He wants to stand right there and shoot arrows at me and tell me I'm nothing but a fill in the blank. But God stood in front of that, and he said, Greg, if you want to be the type of man that has what it takes to operate, have something to offer of worth in a circle of men like that, like Barry and Mark and all those guys that were praying over that man, then you need to do whatever it takes to become the man that God designed you to be. And that has been the fire under me ever since. And it was an extremely huge story, burning bush moment. So, kind of fast forward in my story, came back to North Carolina, came on staff with New Wilderness Adventures in 2007. And the year before that, we went to Alaska. Mark and the guys blessed me a lot in so many ways, but and they allowed me to go on a lot of the trips because, contrary to the burnt chicken tonight, I do have a little bit of a talent to cook. So I was able to go and cook and go at reduced rates, and had many people bless me and scholarship me to a lot of their events. And as Mark was talking about spiritual formation, so much of my spiritual formation was happening as I was walking with these guys, and going and finding guys that I could be honest with, and be in a group of guys like this in this setting where if I'm going down, I can say I'm going down, and they're not going to shame me because of it, and they're going to help me. And so I started walking with guys like that, and they became these amazing heroes to me. So fast forward, I'm in Alaska. There's so many stories. I was asking God, I'm like, Lord, I'm not trying to wrap up for you guys what happened at New Wilderness. I've been on staff since 2007 and been around since 2003, so I couldn't within 10 days tell you all these stories of how I've been blessed and what God's done in my life. But I asked God to show me three stories. And so the next one was I was in Alaska in 2006. I was with Barry and Mark. I can't remember why you were coming on that trip, but something happened. I think you might have been sick with colitis then or what, but so we're in we're real close to Jordan Lake, Jamie, above the camp. What's the name of the camp?
Which one?
On the Naha River.
Chickamauga.
Anyway, it doesn't matter.
North of Ketchikan.
Out north of Ketchikan, and I have just learned to fly fish. Okay, I maybe had learned, not long before this. I'm back here in North Carolina, and there's a guy named Rod Champion, who some of you guys know, who taught me to fly fish. A good person to learn from, by the way. So I'm up there, and I'm not prepared, by the way, for salmon. All right, so I've got heavier equipment, but not heavy enough equipment. And I hook into a salmon. Guys, look, you're in Alaska. If you've never been to Alaska, New Wilderness is going, by the way, this year, so go. Mark can tell you more about that later. But I'm in Alaska. I'm in this beautiful river. There are these mountain peaks around. There's some bear feeding on. It's the place that you want to be as a man, okay? And I hook into this thing, and it is the most fun that I have had. It's just pure pleasure, Joel. You know what I mean, right?
Yes, sir.
Pure pleasure. The ultimate pleasure of a man doing something in the wilderness, hooked to this fish. I'm having to chase it everywhere so it doesn't break me off. And it takes me 45 minutes to an hour. Again, it's because of the equipment that I'm using. It seriously is. Because, I'm using a 5-weight rod. I catch a 15-pound salmon. All right? If anybody knows anything about trout fishing understands what I mean by that. And so, it's like using a crappie rod. And I don't mean like a bad rod, but a crappie fishing rod to catch a 15-pound crappie, right? So I'm chasing this thing all over, right, the river. And, God says to me that I'm made for this. Oh, my gosh, guys. He's like, you're made for this. I see you. I'm with you. Right here, right now. You're made for this. And it was all I could do to catch the fish because of the emotion of catching the fish. And it was just Barry with me, which was very special. And it was so special, guys. I can't begin to tell you how special that moment was. And he was with me to help me catch it. No pictures, no Facebook, I don't have any proof of it other than Barry. But he was there, and, job well done, hugs and pats on the butts, good job, champ, whatever, all those fatherly type moments. Man, it was amazing. burning bush moment in my life where God just said, you're made for this. Fast forward to this past year, 2015. And I've got so many of those stories, guys. I'd love to tell them all, but there's not enough time. New Wilderness, we did a fall adventure this past year, and we were in Colorado, and we had a fall hunt, and it was our second year going to the Route National Forest, and we're hunting for elk and for mule deer. And last year, I was blessed to kill they would call it a 3x2. I'd call it a 5-point, because I hunt in the South, so when you hunt in the South, it's 5-point. But out in Colorado, it's like, it's a 3-point. I'm like, it's got 5 points, dude. And so I killed a 4-point this year, all right? So what is that? That's an 8-pointer, right? So anyway, so this year, we had a bunch of guys. There was 11 of us total. Great hunt. Everybody's killing stuff. I'm passing, right? I'm seeing these deer, and I'm passing. And I'm like, all right, Lord, I don't want this to sound selfish, but I really want to shoot a trophy, And I worked my tail off, I'm telling you. I worked so hard, going where I thought they were. We were there all week. We had 7 days to hunt. And so we've learned the land pretty good because the previous year. And so we're going all these different places, and we're looking for sign. We're finding deer, but we're finding more of the average size mule deer. And 4 days, so the third day in, we finally find where the big ones are, the trophies, right? And we start, but they're smart, are they not? That's why they've got so big. So we're looking everywhere, and I go out with one of my buddies, and this is the third to that last day. So the fourth, this is the 5th day in, and I'm sitting in the woods. And we're about 2 miles back into the forest, and this lifetime buck comes out. All right, it wasn't the deer I killed, and I'll get to that part in a second. But he comes out. He's 40 yards away, and I shoot and I miss. Not to be prideful, but I don't miss very often. I've only missed, I can't count on one hand how many times I've missed in my life deer hunting. And I'm like, what happened? And it was snowing, it was raining, it was a snow rain, and so I missed. So the day before, I fall. All right, we see these big bucks, and that we come up on them. They're from here to the first car there, and we don't see them, and they jump up and they run away, and I'm gonna scramble and I'm gonna get a shot, right? Because mule deer, they're not like whitetails. Whitetails just run and they go. Well, mule deer, they'll run 100 yards and they'll stop and look, and so sometimes you'll have an opportunity. So I slipped on this log. I fall. I think I've broken a rib, because literally my side hits the log, my gun hits the log, right? And consequently it gets my reticle off, but I didn't test it. I should have tested it, and I didn't do that. And the next day I have this really old. He was so many points I couldn't even count, guys. I'm serious, and he had all these stickers and all that for you deer hunters that know what I mean by that. And he was a chocolate color, and I'm about to die when I see him, and I just can't believe this. And I get a shot and I miss because my reticle was off. By the way, I will put a little pride in there. and so I'm like, all right, I'm heartbroken. I'm like, there's my one chance my entire life to kill a trophy like that, and it's not going to happen. But God is good, guys. All right, so the next day we go back out, don't see anything hardly. And then the next to the last day, God says, that night, all night long, He's telling me, I need for you to go out in the woods by yourself. And I'm scared to do that in this situation, not knowing everywhere where I am. And, and by this time, by the way, it snowed 12 inches, right? And so I'm like, go out by myself. This is not very good, practice to do this, and I don't have a GPS. What am I going to do if I get lost or whatever? By the way, you can follow your tracks back when you got 12 inches of snow. But I didn't think about that. So I go out by myself. I go back to where I missed the big deer, right? thinking maybe he's going to come back. And it's cold. It's 20 degrees, 12 inches of snow. And I'm sitting there. I'm reading a book, and I'm just kind of enjoying the moment, talking to God. And five bucks come out, and this buck comes out, and he's huge, guys. From the base of his skull to the top of his antlers is over 30 inches. He's an 8-pointer. I mean, you can't get your whole hand around the base of his antlers in mass. And I've got a buddy's gun, by the way. Now I didn't bring my gun in the woods. And he comes out, and all the rest of them, they take the same path that the big one came in, to the 40 yards. And I know I love to hunt, by the way. So I'm talking more about the hunting now. But anyway, so he goes up the other ridge, and all the rest of them come straight down in front of me. So the temptation was to kill the one I knew I could kill. But I'm like, you know what? No, I'm going to wait. I'm going to see if I can't get a good shot on the big one. And so he's just taking his time, and he's in and out of me being able to see him. And he finally he's about 100 to 120 yards away. He moves between two aspens. Literally, if I don't shoot him when he goes between those two aspens, I'm not going to get a shot again. He goes between those two aspens, 18 inches. I measured it. Had 18 inches to shoot between, and I get him, and I shoot him, and it hits. And I'm looking through the scope. I see the hit. There's blood coming out. And he just acts like nothing's happened. All right? He walks off. The other deer scatter. I give him a little bit of time. And now it hits me. I'm 2 miles into the forest by myself, and I have just shot the deer of a lifetime. What the hell am I going to do? And we do have radios, by the way, but they're not working. We can't get anybody. I can't get anybody on the radio. So it's like when Jeremy Fern killed his the other day, and he called me. He's like, Greg, what do I do? And he's shaking. Adrenaline, guys, you're just pumping, all right. And so adrenaline's pumping. I'm on the radio, and I'm like, breaker, somebody, anybody. I don't care if you're with New Wilderness or not. Somebody help me, please. And so finally, after some time, I go up the hill. I go to see where he is. I get up there. He's still alive, but he's sitting down. I shoot him again, all right? And he gets up and he slides down the snow between these two aspens, and he sits there. And I go and I get in front of him, and I'm watching him die. I'm sitting there watching him die. And remember when I told you I was back in Bryson City, and God told me, "You're my beloved son in whom I'm well pleased"? Well, I had a burning bush moment right there as that deer was passing away. And God spoke to my heart in such an amazing way. And I was bawling, man. I'm telling you, it wasn't because the deer was dying. I mean, I'm heaving again. I mean, all this stuff, and I'm just bawling. And I thought, I'm trying to make sense of it in the moment, thinking, why? I mean, I'm happy, right? And all this other stuff, but why is this such a big moment right now? And God spoke into my heart, and He didn't tell me right in the moment what it was about, but He said, just be here, feel this moment. A few weeks later, by the way, I'll tell you a little bit more about the deer, and then I promise I'll move on. So it was, after we gutted it, it was 315 pounds after it was gutted. So it was over 350, don't you think, Sean, on the hoof. And we had to drag him. I did get help, by the way. Tim Little, who some of you guys know, he followed my footsteps and found me. And it took us 8 hours to drag him out. So it was quite a feat, to say the least. Thankfully, I killed it at about 9:30, 10 o'clock. So fast forward, I'm back home. All right. And so Mark had asked me a question earlier in September, basically like, it's the question we ask lots of people, like, if you could do anything you wanted to do, what would you want to do? And so I was kind of I'd been wrestling with that question. And really, honestly, Mark, that question kind of really brought some discontent into my heart. Discontent not with Mark or with New Wilderness as much as just I was discontented, like something wasn't happy or didn't feel at peace anymore in myself. And so God used that deer to show me, and this is what he spoke over that deer. He said that deer was representative of New Wilderness Adventures. Okay, not that New Wilderness was dying like the deer died, but my relationship with NWA from a, for lack of a better term, professional standpoint was passing away. And then it all came true. I'm like, that's why I was so emotional, because God really made it clear to me through that and through what God was saying in that God was saying that this is your trophy, that New Wilderness, Mark, Barry, much of the men that are here tonight, that is a trophy in my life that can never be undone, and that has made me so much into the man that I am today, that I walked with these people through so much and had so much goodness pumped into me, so much teaching. Exactly, amen. So much teaching, so much life, so much goodness, so many good times. I was trying to think of, like I said, just reminiscing and thinking of stories. I mean, conversations, guys. I mean, so many conversations here and other places where, you would come in and be hurt, and you'd go out feeling strengthened, right? You'd come in and have a question about marriage or about how to deal with this, and go out with knowing what to do and having confidence to go do it, right? I mean, those stories, I can't tell you how many of those there were. And all those tears and that heaving there was so apparent that as I got interpretation on why I was crying like that, why that emotion was there, God said, New Wilderness is a trophy. It's a trophy in your life. And it's a trophy in so many other people's lives. And job well done. Job well done. But I've got something else for you. And so earlier in 2015, Mark and I, our team, we were down in Florida. And I heard God say to me, if you will come away with me, I've got something for you. Well, I've been hearing that all year, all 2015. God kept telling me that over and over. And I never once thought that had anything to do with not being on staff with this ministry. I always likened it to intimacy. That God wanted deeper intimacy with me, which He does, by the way, all of us. He wants that deeper intimacy. I mean, there's so many occasions, Mark. I mean, when we were at, all these different events, I felt God saying, come away with me, come away with me. Come on, let's come away with me. And it took all the way until, really, honestly, even after the thing with the deer, I still questioned it. We go to boot camp in November, and we're speaking, and I could be there and I could teach, but I was feeling this. I'm not supposed to be with New Wilderness. It was feeling like that was dying. And then Mark sealed the deal, by the way. I told him this already. So in November we have the boot camp, or have the bonfire here. Some of you guys might have been here. And Mark taught on Matthew 18. Is it Matthew 18? It's about when Jesus says that if you're going to follow me, you got to take up your cross and follow me. And you got to hate your brother, you got to hate your mom, you got to hate your dad, and your kids, and your greasy little granny, and all these people, and you got to go with me, right? And so that was like, all right, this is truly what I need to do. God's wanting me to move on. And so Mark and I talked not long after that. I resigned. I'm not resigning with an idea of what's next, all right? Because I don't know. I'm following God. I'm doing what I did the time in Bryson City where God said, if you want to be the man that God's designed you to be, you need to go with me. And that's where I'm going. I'm going with God into the unknown. Now, I want to, before I close all that, I want to go into something that is completely about what New Wilderness is about, which is three of our core ideas here, which are our three levels of adventure.
Look it up.
I got them. I'll put them in my notes.
Oh, so you haven't looked at it for God?
No, I know what they are. I just want to make sure I say them right, because I've actually got the definition. So casual adventure, that's where we are tonight, all right? We're at a casual adventure, and Mark wrote this years ago. But casual adventures stretch you beyond your comfort zone. They involve minimal risk, some wasted time. We're not wasting time, by the way. FYI. Possible physical injury. Nobody fall and get hurt.
Come on, man.
Maybe a loss of discretionary income. By the way, if you have some discretionary income, put it in that green thing over there because we need it to pay for tonight. These activities would be the kind of adventure you would love to do on a free weekend or maybe a vacation. So we do a lot of casual adventure. It's a great place to come and to get to know guys and to fellowship. A great entry-level place to get to know New Wilderness Adventures is on one of the casual adventures. So moving on, we've critical adventure. So critical adventure, and the definition for that, involves the major areas of your life and relationships. All right, work, community. It's the risk in these areas. They feel huge and they maybe stretch you beyond your personal resources, leaving you with the question is, do I have what it takes? Am I really the hero? Will I really come through? I mean, that's something like our boot camps, right? The boot camps we've done and things of that nature. And then the crucial, and that's where a lot of us, or where I am right now, which is crucial adventures come as a direct result of God and going into the unknown. I mean, this is written for me right now and where I am in my walk. As Peter followed Christ onto the sea, or as Abraham left all he had to go with God into the destiny of his life, the only chance of success for these adventures is that God must supernaturally intercede. Our question then becomes, does God have what it takes? Will he come through? And guys, I truly believe this. I truly believe this in my own life. I believe this in all of your lives. That those types of adventures are so important at every stage of our life. If you've never experienced God having to come through for you, then you haven't risked enough. You haven't taken those leaps yet in your life. And I don't say that to shame you. I don't say that to make you feel guilty. And if the enemy's making you feel that right now, that's the enemy. The Lord would not say that to you. The Lord would say something like he said to me, which is to be the man that God's designed you to be. Come away with me. Walk with me. And you can be that man. And so tonight, what I want to leave you with is permission. Like Mark gave me that permission all those years ago to leave that job that I was at working for the church. I want to give you permission to follow God. I want you to go and do whatever it is that God desires for you to do. And to do it well. To do it with great pleasure. Like when I was in the Naha River above the Jordan Lake. Enjoying God's presence. I want you to go do it with, dangerous wonder, as Mike Yaconelli would say. And abandoning yourself to the rigors and the wild of the worries of what it's going to look like or how it's going to happen, and follow Him into that unknown, risking and doing what needs to be done. For most of us, including myself, there takes quite a bit of time of preparation. Okay? Quite a bit of time of scouting and finding people in your life that you can go to. That's been a pattern in my life, and that's never going to change. I was telling somebody the other day about all these amazing rescues in my life, people that God has brought into my life, and how blessed I am to have those people. And, the very day that our father passed away, a very significant man was there that was already in my story. His mother-in-law was dying, same day. Do I think God made his mother-in-law die so he would be there the day my father was passing away? I don't think so, but he was there nonetheless. It could have been anybody else, right? But God brought that man there that day to put his arm around me, to love on me. You know, and that meant a lot. And God has brought those men over and over and over into my life to father me, to help me, to become the man that I am today and the man that I'm becoming. And I want you to know that that doesn't come just on its own. That comes because you have an open heart and that you're teachable. And that you have a desire in your life to become the man that God's designed you to be. I tell you what, we over the years have talked, well, Greg, you know, I don't have those men around me, or I don't have a band of brothers, or I don't have guys that will speak into my life like you guys have at this event. And I always say hogwash to that. Because the truth is that if you truly desire that, that will come. You can find those men because those quality men are all over the United States. They're all over the world for that matter. And God will help you to walk into that relationship with that person. So, you know, God wants you to walk with somebody. He doesn't want you to be alone. He wants you to experience healing. He wants you to walk with Him into that intimacy. He wants you to take risks. And He strongly desires to come through for you, so you can go and go wherever it is that He wants you to go. So, you know, huge thanks to you guys for letting me be here tonight and letting me speak. And Mark, of course, thank you for letting me have this night. And I just want to honor Mark. Guys, let me tell you, I can't tell you the amount of love and compassion and fathering that he's poured into me and into so many people, guys. Lap it up. If you have the opportunity to do something with NWA, do it. Don't wait. Do it. And Barry, of course, and Don, and so many people, Tom, so many people that have poured into my life, my brother, of course, and find those guys, because they're going to make you into an amazing creation through God. So I'm in with that. Love you. Love y'all. I'll be back. I'm not going to be here as often as I am. God has this next 6 months to, I'm supposed to, God's putting me through sabbatical. I'm taking 6 months to pray and ask God what's next, you know, to go with Him and read some books, spend some time alone, you know, get some time praying. Chrissy and I, my wife and I are going to go get some time and pray and ask God what's next. I mean, I know my calling, guys. You guys are in the midst of my calling right now, which is to create environments for guys to meet with God. And Bonfire is one of those things. So, excuse my emotion, guys. I'm sorry. So I know my calling, but I just don't know where that assignment is anymore, you know. And God will show me. And, you know, I don't know if it means starting a ministry of my own, or if that means joining another ministry, or might just mean working. I don't know, and I'm fine with that. If it's just working and loving on guys the way God wants me to, then that's what I'll do. You know, whatever it is. If it means moving, I'll move. You know, and so, again, thanks. Love all of you. And Mark, anything?
As I was just thinking about something that I know, I know a lot of you guys are sitting here listening, and there's probably